They thought they had secured a $375 million empire. The champagne was chilled, the press releases drafted, and the CEO's smile plastered across every financial headline. But in the shadows of the final contract, buried deep in page 147, lay a clause so sharp it cut through decades of power. Overnight, fortunes crumbled, allies turned into enemies, and one man's quiet revenge brought the entire boardroom to its knees. The city skyline gleamed under the golden sunset, glass towers shimmering like trophies of ambition. Inside the top floor of Argent Corp's headquarters, the boardroom was buzzing with nervous excitement. The polished mahogany table stretched across the room, dotted with leather chairs, untouched glasses of sparkling water, and folders stacked like miniature skyscrapers. At the center of it all sat Victor Hale, the CEO of Argent Corp. A man in his early 50s, he had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations but charming enough to win over rivals. His salt-and-pepper hair and steely gaze carried the weight of 2 decades in corporate warfare. Tonight, however, he allowed himself a rare smile. This was the night his company would finalize a $375 million merger with a competitor, Iron Vest Holdings. If signed, the deal would cement Argent Corp as the market leader in logistics software, pushing their valuation into the billions. The boardroom lights dimmed slightly as a projector came to life, flashing slides with numbers and projections. Elaine Mercer, the CFO, walked everyone through the last-minute adjustments, her voice steady yet electric with excitement. Gentlemen, ladies, with this deal, Argent Corp not only secures dominance but locks in exclusive patents that would normally cost us triple to develop in-house. Applause rippled around the room. The directors were already whispering about stock surges, early retirements, and media headlines. Everyone was ready to toast, except one man. In the corner sat Daniel Cross, a mid-level legal counsel who rarely spoke in meetings. His tie was slightly crooked, and his brown leather briefcase looked more suited for a law school lecture than a billion-dollar negotiation. Daniel had been buried in reviewing the 1,000-page contract Iron Vest had drafted. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't dazzled by projections or champagne. He was reading every line. As Victor lifted his glass, Daniel cleared his throat. The sound barely carried over the chatter, but Victor's sharp instincts picked it up. He raised an eyebrow. "Something on your mind, Daniel?" The room fell silent. The board hated interruptions, especially from someone so low on the hierarchy. Daniel hesitated, his voice uncertain yet urgent. "There's a clause, buried deep in Section 14. I don't think it's standard. It could shift control in ways that might not favor us." Elaine frowned. "What clause?" she asked sharply. Daniel shuffled through his papers, flipping to a marked page. It's labeled, Transfer of Contingent Assets. It states that, in the event of a market downturn or external regulatory pressure, all operational control defaults to Iron Vest. Not shared control. Complete transfer. Murmurs erupted. A few directors laughed nervously, waving it off as standard legal jargon. Victor, however, leaned forward, the smile gone from his face. He knew contracts hid daggers. He extended his hand. "Show me." Daniel slid the document across. Victor scanned the lines, and his jaw tightened. This wasn't a minor oversight. It was a trap. The room's mood shifted from celebration to unease. "Why wasn't this flagged earlier?" one director demanded. Daniel's voice cracked under the pressure. It was buried under definitions and cross-references. On page 147. It took me hours to connect it. Victor's eyes darted across the room, locking on Elaine. Did Iron Vest's lawyers mention this? Elaine shook her head, visibly rattled. No. They presented this as a boilerplate. I didn't catch it. Victor closed the folder with a snap. The champagne fizz now tasted like ash. Around him, board members whispered frantically, realizing that if they signed this deal, Argent Corp could lose everything under the guise of a market downturn. Daniel's heart pounded. He had spoken up, but in doing so, he'd made enemies of people who wanted the deal done at any cost. Victor's stare lingered on him, unreadable, before turning back to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor said, his voice low but steady, "we may have just dodged a bullet. But I need to know, who put this clause here and why?" The deal of a lifetime had just turned into a question of survival. The next morning, Argent Corp's sleek offices felt less like a temple of ambition and more like a crime scene. Overnight, Word of the discovered clause spread like wildfire. Stock whispers traveled down corridors faster than memos. Employees who had been dreaming of bonuses and promotions now whispered about sabotage. Daniel Cross sat alone in the cafeteria, his coffee untouched. He could feel eyes on him, some grateful, most resentful. To the board, he was both savior and saboteur. He had stopped the signing, yes, but in doing so, he delayed the payday everyone was waiting for. A voice cut through his thoughts. You realize you just made yourself the most unpopular man in this building? Daniel looked up to see Lydia Chan, Argent Corp's head of PR. With sharp suits and sharper words, Lydia thrived in crises. She slid into the seat across from him. The media was ready to run headlines about our triumph. Now, they're circling like vultures, waiting for weakness. Daniel rubbed his temples. I didn't do it to make friends. That clause could have destroyed us. Lydia leaned in, her eyes glinting. You're not wrong. But don't think for a second this was accidental. Iron Vest doesn't make mistakes. They set traps. Which means someone in this building let them. The idea gnawed at Daniel. Was it incompetence? Or betrayal? Meanwhile, Victor was in his private office, staring out at the skyline. On his desk lay the marked contract, its presence as heavy as a loaded gun. Elaine Mercer sat across from him, her confidence frayed. I should have caught it, Elaine admitted. But it was hidden too well. Even our external lawyers didn't flag it. Victor turned, his eyes cold. Elaine, this wasn't hidden. It was placed. The question is, who inside helped them bury it? Elaine froze. You think there's a leak? Victor didn't answer. He simply tapped the folder. Iron Vest knew we'd be blinded by the dollar signs. They wanted us desperate enough to ignore details. But someone on our side gave them the opening. Hours later, a secret meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room. Present were Victor, Elaine, Lydia, and Daniel. Victor wasted no time. We're facing more than a bad deal. We're facing betrayal, he said. Iron Vest wants control, not partnership. And someone here wanted them to succeed. Daniel shifted uneasily. If that's true, then the question is, who gains if Argent Corp collapses? Silence hung heavy. Lydia finally spoke. Competitors. Shareholders. Even someone on this board with a golden parachute waiting. Everyone's got motives. Victor's jaw clenched. Then we dig. Quietly. I want every board member vetted, every communication with Iron Vest traced. No one outside this room knows. Daniel swallowed hard. He hadn't expected his warning to pull him into corporate espionage. But there was no turning back. He was in the inner circle now. That night, as Daniel walked to the parking garage, he noticed something unsettling. A black sedan idled a few rows away, its headlights off. When he reached his car, the sedan pulled out slowly, following at a distance. By the time he reached his apartment, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message. You should have kept your mouth shut. Some deals aren't meant to be saved. Daniel froze, the weight of the message sinking in. This wasn't just about contracts anymore. It was about survival. Morning broke with a storm. Rain hammered against Argent Corp's glass facade, streaking the skyline like dark warning lines. Inside, the tension was palpable. The board assembled in silence, each director carefully avoiding eye contact, their polished smiles replaced by tight lips. Victor entered late, a deliberate power move. He carried the contract in one hand like evidence in a trial. He didn't sit immediately but stood at the head of the table, his voice echoing. Gentlemen. Ladies. Yesterday we almost signed away our company. Not by accident, by design. Iron Vest planted that clause. And someone in this room knew. The accusation hung like thunder. Elaine shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. Several directors protested in unison, insisting on loyalty. But the way their voices cracked betrayed fear more than innocence. Victor's gaze was a scalpel. Iron Vest wanted control, not merger. And one of you tried to hand it to them. Daniel sat at the far end. His stomach knotted. He wasn't a board member, but Victor had insisted he be present. You're the one who caught it, Victor had said earlier. I need you to see how snakes react when cornered. The board erupted into debate. Some demanded transparency, others claimed it was paranoia. But when Lydia entered with a thick folder, the room went still. She dropped it on the table with a heavy thud. "These," Lydia announced, "are communications traced to Iron Vest executives. Messages exchanged in encrypted apps. And they came from inside this building." Gasps filled the room. One director, Harold Kingston, went pale. His trembling hands gave him away before Lydia even named him. Victor's voice turned icy. "Harold, care to explain why Iron Vest CEO referred to you as our friend in the room?" Harold stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. It's not what it looks like. They promised me, just incentives, consulting roles if the merger went through. It was harmless." Victor slammed the folder shut. "You were ready to sell us for a seat at their table. Do you realize what that clause would have done? You weren't giving away shares. You were handing them our soul." The board was in uproar, half demanding Harold's immediate removal, others worried about scandal if word got out. Harold, desperate, pleaded, "Please, Victor, don't ruin me. I was misled." Victor's expression didn't change. "You weren't misled. You were bought." At that moment, Daniel felt the gravity of the battle ahead. If one director could be bought, how many more were compromised? And how far would Iron Vest go to claim victory? After Harold was escorted out, Victor turned to the group. "From this moment, this deal is dead. But Iron Vest won't walk away quietly. They'll come harder. Dirtier. They already know we found their claws." Elaine whispered, almost to herself, "Then what's their next move?" The answer came sooner than expected. By afternoon, news broke that Iron Vest had filed a lawsuit, claiming Argent Corp had acted in bad faith during negotiations. The timing was too perfect, too rehearsed. The trap had tightened. What began as a hidden clause was now a full-blown war. And Daniel realized his warning had triggered something bigger than a cancelled deal. He had lit the fuse on a corporate battlefield worth hundreds of millions. The news cycle exploded within hours. Major outlets ran headlines screaming betrayal, lawsuits, and boardroom chaos. Argent Corp's stock slid by 7% before lunch. Traders smelled blood, short sellers swarmed, and employees felt the ground shift beneath their feet. Victor Hale stormed through the office, his presence drawing stares. He gathered his inner circle, Elaine, Lydia, and Daniel, in a war room lit only by screens flashing stock tickers. The mood was grim. "Harold's betrayal was just the beginning," Victor said, pacing. "Iron Vest wanted us weakened. Now they're painting us as frauds in the press. They want regulators circling." Elaine shook her head. "We can fight the lawsuit, but if investors panic, we'll lose leverage." Lydia leaned forward. "We need a counter-narrative. Right now the story is that Argent Corp tried to trick Iron Vest. We need to show it's the opposite, that Iron Vest set us up with a predatory clause." Victor tapped the contract. "But how do we prove intent? A bad clause is suspicious, not illegal. Unless..." He trailed off, staring at Daniel. Daniel stiffened. "Unless what?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "Unless we find communications that prove Iron Vest planned the ambush. Emails, memos, something that shows they orchestrated this." Daniel exhaled. "That won't be easy. They'll bury their tracks deeper than they buried the claws." Lydia smirked. "Then we dig deeper. Harder. The public loves underdogs. If we show Iron Vest as predators, we can turn this storm into sympathy." Victor agreed but added a warning. "Remember, this isn't just legal chess. This is war. They'll retaliate." That evening, Daniel sat in his apartment surrounded by stacks of documents, digital files glowing on his laptop. Hours blurred into night as he cross-referenced drafts and footnotes. Somewhere between page 110 and 178, he noticed something strange. One draft contained phrasing not present in others. A specific sentence about transfer of contingent assets had been copy-pasted oddly, the font slightly off. He dug deeper, tracing metadata. His pulse quickened. This insertion hadn't come from Iron Vest's legal team. It had been edited from inside Argent Corp's servers. Daniel's blood ran cold. Harold wasn't the only mole. The next morning, Daniel rushed to Victor's office. "It wasn't just Harold," he said. dropping the printed metadata. The clause was inserted from our network. Someone else helped plant it. Victor scanned the evidence, fury tightening his jaw. Who had access to this draft? Elaine paled. Only senior counsel. And me. The room froze. Victor's eyes drilled into her. Elaine. She shook her head violently. No. I'd never. Victor, you know me. Someone could have used my clearance. Framed me. But doubt hung heavy. Lydia crossed her arms. Convenient defense. Victor slammed his fist. Enough. If there's another traitor, we find them. Daniel, I want every access log, every keystroke traced. If this was planted, we'll rip out the roots. Later that day, as Argent Corp scrambled to contain the crisis, Daniel received another anonymous message. Stop digging. Or next time, it won't just be warnings. He stared at the screen, unease twisting in his gut. The war wasn't just corporate. It was personal now. Argent Corp was bleeding. By Friday, the stock had dipped another 12%. Investors were restless, analysts skeptical, and Iron Vest's lawyers ruthless. Yet in the chaos, whispers of support emerged. Victor scheduled a discreet dinner at a high-end steakhouse downtown. Only 4 people attended. Victor, Daniel, Lydia, and an unexpected guest, Arthur Vega, a billionaire venture capitalist who held quiet stakes in Argent Corp. Arthur, silver-haired and intimidating, carved into his stake with slow precision. Victor, I've backed you for years because you deliver results. But this. He gestured vaguely. This is fire. And you're choking on the smoke. Victor didn't flinch. Arthur, Iron Vest wants to strangle us. If we cave, Argent Corp dies. If we fight, we may bleed, but we'll survive stronger. Arthur sipped his wine. Survival isn't enough. I need assurance my money won't vanish. What's your play? Victor leaned back. Expose Iron Vest. Prove they manipulated this deal. And root out the traitors on our side. Arthur studied him, then turned to Daniel. You're the one who found the clause, yes? Interesting. A small voice in a big room, and suddenly you're central. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I just did my job. Arthur smirked. Sometimes the smallest voices scream the loudest truth. Keep digging. I'll keep the wolves from tearing the stock apart. For now. That night, Arthur's hedge fund quietly bought more Argent Corp stock, signaling confidence. The market reacted with a small rebound, enough to steady morale. But Iron Vest wasn't idle. By Monday, leaked emails surfaced online suggesting Argent Corp executives had attempted to mislead regulators. Headlines screamed scandal. Elaine was named directly. Victor summoned his circle. Elaine was pale, clutching the leaked pages. These are fabricated, she insisted. I never wrote these. Lydia examined them closely. They're convincing. But look, the timestamps don't align with Argent Corp's internal calendar system. It's forgery. Victor slammed the table. Iron Vest is manufacturing evidence. First clauses, now leaks. They want to bury us under lies. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we prove it's false. If we expose even one forgery, the public will question the rest. Elaine whispered. But how? They control the narrative. Lydia's eyes glinted. Not if we control the counter-narrative. We leak proof that Iron Vest doctored documents. Make it public. Force regulators to look at them instead. Victor agreed, but his voice was heavy. Remember, if we play dirty, they'll play dirtier. This won't end with press releases. That night, Daniel received a knock on his apartment door. When he opened it, a manila envelope lay on the floor. Inside were photographs. Grainy shots of him leaving Victor's office, dining with Arthur, working late at home. A note was clipped to the top. We're watching. Choose your side wisely. Daniel's stomach churned. He wasn't just in a boardroom fight anymore. He was being hunted. The boardroom was boiling with fear. Iron Vest's lawsuit had shaken Argent Corp, but the emergency injunction to freeze assets threatened total collapse. Directors shouted over one another, demanding settlements, resignations, anything to protect themselves. Victor Hale slammed the table. Stop panicking. This is exactly what Iron Vest wants. chaos. But they underestimate us. His gaze locked on Daniel. You've uncovered more truth than anyone here. Find me the link that ties Iron Vest's hands. Daniel felt the weight settle on his shoulders. He was a mid-level lawyer thrown into a battlefield of billions. Yet he couldn't back down now. Later that night, combing through digital files, Daniel found a clue. An internal memo about consultant compliance, digitally signed by Elaine Mercer. His blood ran cold. Was Elaine truly the traitor? Or was this another forgery planted to shatter trust from within? Before he could decide, his phone buzzed. Another anonymous text appeared. Now you're getting close. Be careful who you trust. Daniel stared into the glow of the screen, realizing Argent Corp's enemy wasn't just Iron Vest. Someone inside wanted the company destroyed, and time was running out. Dawn broke over the city as Victor convened one last emergency meeting. The injunction hearing was hours away. Argent Corp's survival depended on what Daniel had uncovered. Daniel stood before the board, holding a flash drive. This contains access logs from the forged documents. They don't just show Iron Vest's fingerprints, they show coordination with the consulting firm Harold introduced. He paused. And those consultants were paid through a shell company linked directly to Iron Vest's CFO. Gasps filled the room. Proof, finally. Victor seized the moment. Then we fight. Not as victims, but as predators. With Lydia's help, the evidence was leaked to regulators and media. Headlines shifted within hours. Iron Vest exposed in corporate sabotage scheme. By afternoon, the injunction was denied. Iron Vest's stock plummeted while Argent Corp stabilized. Harold faced criminal charges, and Iron Vest's executives scrambled under investigation. In the quiet after the storm, Victor clasped Daniel's shoulder. You saved this company. Don't forget, it only takes one hidden clause to topple empires. But it also takes one voice to stop them. Daniel looked out at the skyline, exhausted yet resolute. He had started as a whisper in a boardroom, but ended as the man who turned betrayal into survival. The 300